Starter Solenoid, the definitive guide. Chapter 1. What is a starter solenoid? What is a starter solenoid? A starter solenoid is a combination of solenoid and switches, full name, starter solenoid switch. It is one of the main components of the car starter, motor, starter Bendix drive, starter solenoid. As we all know, the starting of the engine requires external support, and the car starter is playing this role. In general, the starter uses three components to achieve the entire starting process. 1. The motor receives electric current from the battery and make the starter drive gear generate mechanical movement. 2. The Bendix drive engages the pinion gear into the engine flywheel and disengages automatically after the engine start. 3. And the starter's on/off function is controlled by the starter solenoid. Starter solenoid functions. Starter solenoid has two functions. 1. To control the start circuit on and off, connect the battery to the starter. 2. Drive the starter pinion engaging in the flywheel ring gear. Function 1. When turned on the ignition switch and the starter circuit is turned on, the electric current flows to starter solenoid and create the electromagnetic force. The electromagnetic force of the solenoid switch sucks the movable iron core in the starter solenoid to contact the two terminals, one of which connect to the positive pole of the battery and the other terminal to the starter. Function 2. The electric current divides into two streams flowing through the starter solenoid. A stream flow through the sucking coil, generating a magnetic force to suck the movable iron core and move the fork backward so that the starter pinion can engage the engine flywheel. B. The another stream flows through the holding coil, creating a magnetic force to keep the core in the post-pulling position until the starting complete. Where is the starter solenoid? In a car starter motor with starter solenoid, the starter solenoid is usually mounted directly on the two of starter motor. So where is the starter motor? Where is the starter solenoid? Starter solenoid operation. The whole process of starter solenoid switch can be divided into three stages: sucking, holding, return. 1. Starter pinion gear. 2. Solenoid coil. 3. Ignition switch. 4. Car battery. 5. Slip ring. 6. Starter armature. 7. Field coil. 8. Planet gear. 9. Ford. 10. Starter clutch. 11. Flywheel. 1. E-sucking. When the ignition switch turns to the start position, the battery current flows to the sucking coil and hold coil. The current then flows from the sucking coil to the armature coil, thus make the coil rotated at a low speed. In this way, the movable core of the solenoid switch sucks into the core. Through the sucking operation, the starter drive pinion will be pushed out and engaged with the ring gear. Also, the contact plate closes the main contact point. 2. E-holding. When the main contact point of the plate closes, no current flows through the sucking coil. So, the magnetic field coil and the armature coil can get the electric current directly from the battery. The armature coil then begins to rotate at high speed, and the engine starts. Because no current flows through the sucking coil, so the moving iron core can only hold the coil in a fixed position by the magnetic force. 3. E-return. When the ignition switch turns from start to ON, the current flows from the primary contact side to the holding coil via the sucking coil. In this point, since the magnetic force formed by the sucking coil and the holding coil neutralize each other, they lose the force to hold the movable core. Thus, the plunger is pulled back by the return spring force, and the contact plate is disconnected. The starter stops. Chapter 2. Starter solenoid troubleshooting. Starter solenoid problems. The starter solenoid has 4 common problems. Bad starter solenoid. 1. The suction fails occasionally, or works in engine cooling only and fails in engine warming up. 2. When starting up, the starter solenoid cannot reset. Release the start button, the starter remains in operation and only stops when power off. 3. The elastic force of the return spring weakens after repeated use, resulting in that the drive gear of one-way clutch cannot be restored timely, but driven and reversely dragged by the flywheel ring gear. 4. When the starter starts, it will make a periodic noise from the starter solenoid, but the starter does not rotate. Symptoms of a bad starter solenoid. A multimeter is needed to test and verify the problems of the starter solenoid, but before the testing, the following table can be used to determine whether the starter solenoid works. Fault symptom. 1. The starter solenoid makes the clicking noise continuously. 2. After switching on the starter solenoid makes the clicking noise, slightly moves but does not rotate. 3. The start button has disengaged, and the drive gear has returned, but the starter continues to rotate. 4. The start button is disengaged, the starter continues to rotate, but the drive gear cannot reverse. Possible reasons for the failure. 1. The starter solenoid holding coil keep holding or the contact sealing off. 2. A. The connection between the solenoid and starter is defective. B. Starter solenoid is broken. 3. The starter solenoid contact burnout. 4. The starter solenoid has contact burnt, or the movable iron core and return spring cannot move due to no enough elastic force, poor quality.